everybody, and welcome to Win Championship Traits of Life, a show focused on strengthening the mental fitness of athletes, coaches, and anyone and everyone that works with a team on every single level. I'm Lee Elias, that's JB Spizzo, and we are joined today by University of Pittsburgh Defensive Quality Control Assistant Phil DeCapito. Phil is in his 6th overall year at Pitt and has been an invaluable contributor to a defensive unit that has ranked among the nation's very best over the past 2 seasons. Phil initially served on Pat Narduzzi's staff from 2015 through 17 as a defensive graduate assistant. He served in that same capacity during the 2018 season at Memphis, which finished with the AAC runner-up and earned a Birmingham Bowl berth. Following the 2018 season, he was named the defensive coordinator at Lake Erie College, an NCAA Division II program in Ohio, before ultimately reuniting with Narduzzi at Pitt. A native of Warren, Ohio, Phil was a standout football player and wrestler at Warren John F. Kennedy Catholic School, earning first-team All-Trumbull County honors as a senior lineman. He went on to play 4 seasons at Emory and Henry College, earning his bachelor's degree in education and physical education. We are really excited to have you here today, Phil. Welcome to Win.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I really appreciate you guys having me.
We're happy to have you. If I'm not mistaken, I think you're our first football guest. We talked a little bit in the pre-show about how much I love the game of football. Again, our audience knows, grew up in hockey, coached hockey. But as we talked about, I'm just a massive fan of football. I have coached football too, but there's something special about that sport, Phil. And I just love every minute that I've had with it. So speaking of that, you were a standout high school player and collegiate athlete. Yep. Sports are a huge part of your life. Was coaching something you knew you wanted to do at a young age? Did you fall into it? How did you end up in the predicament you're in now?
So really, when I went into college, I said I wanted to be in physical therapy. I wanted to be in strength and conditioning. That was kind of what I wanted to do. I always loved to train. And then about midway through my college career, I had a lot of coaches that really had effect on me, but I don't think I really ever appreciated it until one actually left me. And when he left me, he was replaced with a person who, he wasn't really as invested in much in the players. And I was like, man, this was a coach. I had a coach prior. What a lot of coaches, not a lot of coaches will admit this, but I was a list guy when I was in college. First time on my own, I was a guy that got in a lot of trouble. I did that. And I had that coach come in and pull me up and help me get on the right path. And I just said, well, I want to have an impact on someone the way that someone had an impact on me. And that was when I decided I wanted to get into coaching.
Yeah, it's totally a calling. We always say, unfortunately, coach is never really enough to describe what a coach does, right? You're an educator, you're a teacher, you're a mentor, you're a leader, you're a follower. I mean, it's all these different things that you've got to do as a coach. And, I admire you for understanding that. There's a term I learned when I was in school. It was never be a kid's last coach, and I really took that to heart of like, there's a lot of coaches that burn out their athletes or they don't do it right. Never be a kid's last coach. And you emulate that. You emulate that, man.
No, the best, Lee and Phil, thanks for coming on the show. I love it. Thank you so much. It's teach, coach, mentor. And I think that's all part of it. Some coaches just want to draw up the plays, X's and O's. It's all I want to do. Well, it's way more than that. And Phil and Lee, I just want you both to know 4-time flag football champion right here. Okay. 4-time.
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
On all the military posts I played on. So let's just, I
like the way you did the 4-time. It's like a wrestler, the 4-time champion.
Exactly. Phil, we see the wonderful part of coaching, sitting on our couches, watching our favorite team on TV. But a huge part of coaching, especially to collegiate level, I saw it at the United States Military Academy at West Point, is recruiting. And obviously when you're watching film on a potential candidate, you could see him play, but until you see him play in person and you interview him and, or, if you're working with a women's team, that sort of thing. But for football, can you expand on, you're out there on the road and you're recruiting, you're looking for the next, defensive star for Pitt football. What qualities you're looking for? And can you tell our audience the importance of it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, and I always tell this to any kid that I ever talk to, is when it comes to recruiting, that highlight tape is your first introduction. That is your first introduction to a coach, to a staff. So always put your best plays first. Always make sure that you are tagged well before the ball is snapped so they know exactly who you are, so they can see you from the beginning. And once we find those highlight tapes that we like, well, then the next step is we watch game film, because, all right, we've seen what you do at your best, so let's see what you do the whole game. So how do you play that whole game? And once you go out on the road recruiting, you know, the biggest thing for me, and I've had a few opportunities, unfortunately, as a quality control, I don't get to go out on the road recruiting. I get to meet these kids when they come here on Pitt's campus, and they're on their visits and their tours, and I get to know them then. But I don't get to go out on the road. But when I did get to go out on the road, the biggest thing is trying to find those kids that really do love football. I think you've talked about it before. You talked about it a little bit before. It might have been before we started, but collegiate football is a full-time job. I mean, we're talking, you know, 20 hours a week just on the schedule, or I think it's 8 hours a week, but really probably 20 hours with everything that's extra in. You know, who's going to come do the extra film? Who's going to make sure that they're, you know, we start meetings at 7:30 in the morning. Who's here at 6 a.m. getting the extra work that, you know, separates those guys from, you know, who's going to be the next star. And it's really just kind of finding those kids that love football, because if a kid is the best of the best, but he doesn't love football, is he going to last? Is that a kid that might go in the transfer portal? Is that a kid, you know, if things don't go his way, you're looking for that kid who loves football enough to respond to the adversity that comes inherently in the game.
Yeah, I just have a quick follow-up there, Phil. You know, it's funny you say that, and some people might say, well, who's going to play the sport that they don't love? And I can tell you, working in the NHL, you know, we had a player that didn't really love the game of hockey, but it was what he was talented, what he could do, and he earned a nice living doing it. But he truthfully couldn't wait to get in 10, 12 years, and that was it. He was going to go do something else. So I think that's very valuable what you say. And Phil, one more thing. And when you're trying to find these young men, and when you're watching this game, Phil, and everything else, what character traits though are you looking for?
Well, on the film, you're looking for, you know, high effort, you know, not a kid that looks like he's slowing down. You know, whether it's offense or defense, you don't want to see a kid that the term that in sports is used, and I'm not sure if it's used in hockey, is it's a love. You don't want to see a kid, you know, when you're watching the game film, a kid, well, the ball's not going towards me, so I'm good. I did my job. You're trying to find that kid who, you know, will run all the way across the field as soon as that play breaks, and, you know, he hawks down. I think a couple of weeks ago we had a defensive back who was on the boundary side of the game, and he ran, he ran 23 miles an hour. He was clocked at his speed. He ran like over 100 yards to hawk down the quarterback that was all the way on the other side of the field, who broke out on a scramble. And I mean, it was all the way down the end. And I mean, it was Brandon Hill, and he did an amazing job. But that's an example of, like, on Pitt's team, he's a kid that I see every single day. He's a high effort kid. You have to slow him down in practice.
Love it.
You know, Phil, I'm gonna dive deeper on this with you, because I think it's important for our audience to understand, you know, a few aspects of this, right? So when you, especially Division I sports, but we'll just use college as a whole, right? Whenever you get to whatever division you're playing or pro, there's going to be a high level of talent. And don't get me wrong, and I mean, you won't disagree with this. Talent's very important. It's an important part of the game. All right. And talent is developed over time and hard work and everything like that. And then the next level is tactics, and that comes from the coaching staff. You know, great talent can't overcome bad tactics. Those two things have to work together. But I think the things that people don't realize, young athletes don't realize, is that you need a third thing, which is a team bond. And to be part of a team bond, you need to be a good person. All right. So, you know, I've been privileged in my life. I've interviewed a lot of professional coaches, collegiate coaches, and athletes. And what I'm always amazed at, and I find that parents and young athletes seem to just miss this sometimes, is that I rarely hear a coach talk about how talented an athlete is at that level. It's what kind of character do they have? What kind of mentality do they have? Like you said, how do they deal with adversity? How do they deal with their community? Right. So can we just talk about that a little bit from your point of view, of especially the younger athletes out there, that look, you can be the fastest running back. You can be the best quarterback. You also need to be the best person. And this is the other part of it, right, Phil, is that if you are willing to put the work in for the talent, you actually already have the skill set needed to learn to be a good person and have a good character and study. It's all there. You just have to expand it, right? But can you talk a little bit about that as a collegiate coach, about how important character really is? Because I don't want our audience to miss on that.
Well, one thing, and one of our coaches always says this every year. And when you look at a team, and I think it goes with all sports, there's kind of that 80-20 rule. There's 10, 80, 10. There's 10% of people who are doing every single thing right. There's kind of 80% that are kind of in the middle. And then there's 10% who are kind of going against the grain. And it's up to those 10% to really kind of pull the positive 10%, which side is pulling which guys in.
Right.
And those, we call it, and I've heard a couple coaches say this, is you want to avoid the paper cuts. What are easy mistakes that you can avoid that take away from, if I got to come into a meeting and talk about how you're missing class, or, I got to spend it, are you using that time to get better at football, or just using it to screw around? Then you're taking time away from getting better. So that high character, that high motor, I motor really to describe what's going on the field, but that high character stuff is, can you control what you can control, and can you make an effort to just do what you have to do? If you do what you have to do all the time, just attempt to do it, then half their stuff is already taken care of.
Yeah, go ahead. You're good.
Yeah, if you do what you're supposed to do, if you go to class, if you take advantage of all the opportunities that you have, or at least try to, I don't want to say you always have to do everything, because there is trial and error, there is failure in life. But, if you're trying to do it, you can overcome a lot of other obstacles that are going to come your way.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing up a couple of things that I'm really passionate about. So the first one is this: I remember the time period of almost the day that I'll preface it like this: I was a BC student in high school. It wasn't anything crazy, but BC student, sometimes I get the A's, and, to the dismay of my parents, because I loved hockey. Hockey was all I cared about at that time in my life. And I just wanted to get through high school to play college hockey. And I remember I got to college, and I remember it was very apparent that, like, if you don't do good in school, you're not playing. Right. Mm-hmm. And it clicked in my mind. And this is how I justified it. I didn't look at it as like, oh, I got to do school. I looked at it as like, okay, that's something that's part of hockey, because I got to do it to keep playing. And I remember I had this kind of turn, this polarity shift of, you have to stop looking at school as annoying, and it's part of the game, because it's an obstacle I have to hurdle. And this is the connection point, Phil, was I always worked hard on the ice. I still do, right? That's just part of who I am. And I said, if I can do it on the ice, I can do it in the classroom. I already know how to do it. I started applying that to different aspects of my life, became a straight A student pretty quickly, right? I'm not bragging. I used my hockey skill set to become a better student. The other thing you talked about was control. I'm big on control, because this is something that ails so many amateur athletes, right? They're worried about the standings. They're worried about the other team. They're worried about what coach is thinking. Man, you have a circle of control. Inside that circle is the only things you control. And it's basically your work ethic, what you put in there, and your thoughts. That's about all we control as human beings. Not much. Only focus on the stuff you control. Everything outside of that circle, you got to somewhat ignore, because it has no effect on you. When athletes, coaches, anybody focuses solely on what they control, it's amazing the results that start to happen, right? Because you're not distracted. I even say you could break this down at the scoreboard, man. Like, don't get me wrong. As coaches, you got to look at the scoreboard. You got to know the score. You got to know what's happening, right? But the scoreboard's actually irrelevant till the end of the game. It's just a tally. Right? It doesn't mean anything till the game is over. So I tell players that you worry about the next play, you worry about the next shift, you worry about what you have control over. You want to comment on that real quick before I jump into my next question?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, the biggest thing is, and especially whether it's life or whether it's not, you can control whether you go to class or not. Right. You can control, whether it's Division I or Division III. I mean, I've been lucky enough to where I played Division III football. I've been at every single level of collegiate football, from Division III through Power 5 and everywhere in between. If you control what you can control, take advantage of the opportunities that you have, whether it's seeing a tutor the main one that you brought up is go to class, class, be attentive, control what you can control, go to class. That's a big thing. But even to what you just said, it's the next play mentality. Do your job on that play, control that you do your job. After that, you take care of the next play. Worry about that. The ball may not come to you. You may have done your job and then gone above and beyond it. Well, it didn't work out. Well, go back next time and do it again. The biggest thing, and we talk about, especially on defense, the biggest thing on defense is, the hardest thing to me really is offense. The biggest difference between offense and defense, and I apologize jumping around a little bit, is offense. You do have an opportunity to punt at the end. If three plays don't work out, you got to punt. On defense, if one play doesn't work out, that's a touchdown. That's a possibility. So being able to get the guy down, like I talked about earlier, was the guy running all the way across the field and using his effort and motor to get that guy down and give us another chance to play that next play, to, give everyone another chance to do their job, to control what they can control.
Love it.
I love it. There's a couple of things there. One, that max effort, Phil, I love. The other thing I want to talk quickly about, and you both brought it up, and I think it's so important for young athletes to understand is, so when I worked at the United States Military Academy, when I was the first sergeant of the prep school, our commandant, Colonel Mike Anderson, who was a West Point professor, I remember him telling, because a large group of the West Point prep school are athletes, and he said to them, listen, the West Point professor doesn't care you're an athlete, and nor should they. So you got to go to class and you got to do well. And oh, by the way, if you are an athlete, the West Point professor expects more out of you because you already know how to work within the system. So think about that, as you're doing your studies. And I was like, wow, he's exactly right. And that's what these athletes should understand. That professor expects more out of you because you understand a structured system. So you know what? He expects you to turn in your homework, or she expects you to turn in your homework and do your assignment on time and be respectful. And that's all. And that's all a part of it. And I think that's so great. Lee, did you have a follow up, or you want me to keep going?
I always have a follow up, JB. That's my style. I could do these for 4 or 5 hours. Now, last thought on that, Phil, before I do get to the next question, was that it's only athletes are going to understand this, what I'm about to say. But when you're on the field, on the ice, whatever, the court, there's a feeling. There's a feeling you get that's undescribable. It's being an athlete, and usually it has to do with being in the zone. But your heart beats faster and you feel it. You feel whatever that feeling is, right?
Yeah.
You talked about studying game film. I remember I got to a point where I was feeling that when I was studying game film. I was feeling that when I was training off the ice. I was kind of feeling it in the classroom, not always, but every once in a while, I just want the audience to know, because this goes beyond sport. If you can feel that, and by the way, that is present moment awareness most of the time is what that is. You can apply it to everything. So if you don't want to watch game film, you got to ask yourself, why am I not feeling it right here? All right, it might be as simple as applying it. And again, Phil, again, I'm adding questions here. I'm sorry, but one of the things I've noticed about pro athletes and really Division I collegiate athletes was that that's something that's typically on most, if not all of the time, especially with pro athletes, man. They can't even shut it off, right? Like they're upbeat all the time. And it's funny when I talk to younger athletes, well, I need a break. And not like a break because they're completely fatigued, just like I need some time off. And I go, man, the top level guys, they don't do that, right? It's on all the time from the moment they wake up. Screw it. Even when they're sleeping hard. Like it's an all the time thing, So I just think that's again, I don't know if you want to comment on that. Again, JB, I'm adding a lot of questions. I'm sorry. I'm excited to be talking.
No, I think it's so important that that you do that. A friend of mine was the assistant operations director for the Colts when they lost the Super Bowl to the Saints, I think it was, right? And Peyton Manning was playing for that. And that's where the Saints put that new defense in, after the onside kick and all that. And on the plane back, Peyton Manning, he said Peyton Manning was breaking down that film of that game, of the loss. Like everybody else was just like, having a beverage and like, oh my gosh, he was breaking down that game film. And, basically, hey, they're not ever going to beat me on that scheme again. So think about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, one thing that I've noticed, and this is, I think, my 9th year in coaching. So, I mean, there's a lot of coaches that have a lot more years than me, but I've been in it long enough to see, the ones that have become great players are the guys that do put in the extra effort, the guys that beat the coaches in the building, the guys that are here when the coaches leave, or in which with hockey as well as, I know you work in football, so like the scouting report, the coach's scouting report is, it could be anywhere of 300 pages. And, one of my jobs as a quality control is to narrow that down into the things that we need to know. And, some of the best players that I've been around or worked with are the guys that ask for more. Well, I give the players this. So what else do the coaches know that maybe, I'm not ready for? So, who takes that extra mile, whether it's a player coming in and asking for, a portable version of what's on the coach's board, that covers the walls, or, a guy who finds something and asks me to help him look into it, whether it's a tendency, because on defense, a lot of what we do is tendency based. So we're looking for who's giving that away, who's giving away if it's run or pass, who's giving it away, or what are they doing? What can I do better? And, the best players that I've seen, a good example would be, the guys, and I'm sure you saw last year, I think we had 6 guys drafted in the NFL, 4 of them on defense. All 4 of those guys were the guys that come in here, especially the 2 defensive ends and the 1 safety, DeMar Hamlin, Patrick Jones, Rashad Weaver, DeMar Hamlin. Those were the guys that took the extra mile. Those were the guys that were here when the coaches were, those were the guys that came in right after the bowl game, from the year before and wanted to watch tape, and they wanted to see what was going on. I remember getting a text a couple days after Christmas, a player asking me why the film wasn't in yet. And I was like, all right, we'll get it in. We'll make sure everything is in and you can get a chance to watch it.
He's like, hell with your Christmas dinner, coach. Come on. I want to watch the game film.
Yeah.
Love that kid.
They want to.
That's awesome.
They want to know, those are the guys. And when you don't have to do that, it makes not just coaching, but that brings the next guy in, because those are the guys that, set the example for the next guy coming in. That's that 10% that's pulling someone in with.
Well, I'll say this to you. If you're listening to this, you're getting a roadmap here on how to succeed both in Division I sports and pro sports. But, one of the other things I wanted to dive into, Phil, was, again, the audience knows me. I grew up in hockey. I'm a hockey guy.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this a little bit in the pre-show. I was asked one time recently, what's the ultimate team sport? And most hockey people say hockey, and I will say hockey is up there. It is. Yep. It takes a lot of teamwork to work at the hockey level. But I said, no, it's football. And man, they looked at me like they couldn't believe that I, of all people, had said that. And I said, you got to understand, hockey is a flow sport, and you got to be on the same mind with everybody else. But I said, really, when you look at it, it's 5 guys on the ice at a time and a goalie, and it's pretty similar. I said, when you look at football, you got an O-line, you got a quarterback, and running backs, you got receiver. I mean, you have so many teams within the team that have to know what everyone else is doing. Right? Like the linemen have to know what the receivers are doing. It's unbelievable levels of teamwork to make a football team work every play, not just the whole game, but every play. So football is the ultimate team sport to me. And that's going to bring me to my question here, right? Keeping in mind, hockey teams are about 22 players. Football teams, about 100 players. 20 staff. There's a lot of people on a football team on a sideline. All have to be in the same loop here. And that's coordinating it and planning and everything. Tell us the importance of mentorship amongst the group, teamwork amongst the group, and how you guys succeed that and the impact it has on the team.
Okay.
Give us all the secrets, Phil. We're recording.
All the secrets. All right. Well, really, I think you kind of brought it up. And one thing that we do here, and I've seen it at other places as well too, is each unit is kind of its own, family, their own group. They hold each other accountable, with their coach and maybe a support staff member in that room, as kind of trying to lead the way, let players do a lot of the work, and they're the ones that are going to take the room to succeed. But, the coach is there to guide them. And then you have the coordinator. So like every year, each group comes up with their own name, their own identity as a position group. And then we also come up with an identity as a defense.
Right.
And, what is the mission statement of the defense? It's taking the defensive line, the linebackers, and the DBs together to make something that, identifies all 3 of them, but then also identifies what the goal is as a defense. So, those things, and then having those mentorships in between them, the older players mentor the younger players, kind of the coaches mentor the older players, as it goes. And you also mentor the younger players. You're the one that's showing them the way. But those older guys are the ones that are going to bring the younger guys up. Those seniors are going to lead those freshmen. You're going to help those seniors, take that next jump to that next step, or those older guys. But, I can't say enough about the leadership coming from within the room. You know, the best teams that I've ever been around have the best leaders as players.
See,
You
what
know,
you're
those
doing, what you're doing, Phil, is you're continuing to build that internally, right?
Yeah.
So instead of this rite of passage system, you're building that leadership, building that leadership, building that leadership. So it just continues the positive cycle. And a lot of times, you know, Lee and I are in the culture development business. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And we tell teams are like, I want to change a culture. I want to have the Patriot way, or I want to have this, or whatever it is. And they come up with these great terms. Well, guess what? You know, it's not going to happen in a month or maybe even a season. It's over this. You're building this culture and you're bringing it in and you're forging it and you're doing it the correct way. The other thing, Phil, that I really liked, and you can caveat on the same point, is, you know, I met a lot of your coaching staff, and what a great mix of old, new, young, motivated, this experience. Like, it's just a great group of coaches that I felt really mentor each other. And can you talk to the importance of
coaching
that?
staff's a team too.
100% it's a team, right?
Yeah. And I'm lucky enough that in my career, as a player, I mostly played offense. And then when I got into collegiate coaching, you know, one of the things I did was I said, I want to be a Division I college football coach. And how I did that was, all right, what do I got to do that? I played at the Division III level. I was a student assistant at the Division III level, which is an amazing level of sports. And I can't say enough about what Division III football taught me and how I am. But I was like, all right, I want to get to Division I. How am I going to do that? Well, I'd known Coach Narduzzi. My father was a football coach back in the 70s and 80s. He coached for Coach Narduzzi's father. So I'd met him, you know, along my way, and he gave me his number. He said, if you ever need anything, call me. So I called him and asked him for a job. Well, he said, well, you don't have any experience. How do I get that? It's an entry-level job. He said, well, go somewhere else and figure it out, and then let me know if this is still what you want to do. So I called my high school coach, Tony Napolet, who I can't say enough about, you know, him and the impact he had on my life. But he called up Youngstown State's head coach and said, hey, I got a guy that wants to coach. He said, all right, you can volunteer. So I came in and I volunteered. I worked for free and I did whatever I had to do to survive. I moved in with my grandparents for a little bit, you know, with a college degree too. So it was, I just took out all these student loans and spent 5 years in college. And now I'm living with my grandma for a little bit. And then I moved back in with my mom's. I was working at a restaurant in Warren, Ohio. I was cooking fried chicken. I was bouncing at bars, whatever I had to do to make enough money to survive so I could make this dream come true. And like along my way, it's the thing you learn. I've got a chance to work with defensive line, linebackers, and secondary. And I kind of went in a roundabout way. I apologize for that, but those coaches, I've taken something from each of those coaches. And, you know, I've been blessed to be around a lot of great coaches who have wanted to, you know, extend to me the knowledge that they've learned. So I don't make the same mistakes that maybe they did. And, you know, for them to teach me. And that's one of the things, you know, whether it's here at Pitt or when I was at Memphis or Youngstown State or any of those things, you know, and the same thing when I was a defense coordinator at Lake Erie College, you know, teaching the young guys, you know, what someone taught me. Hey, someone taught me this. I want to show you how to do this, you know, even if it's just as simple as when I was at Lake Erie College, hey, there's a pot of coffee right in the GA room. That's the only pot of coffee because it's a small school. So if the coffee's out, make more coffee.
I love it. Take the initiative, right? You know, Phil, you're inspiring me to tell a little bit of my story that people don't know too, based on yours, because I love that you shared that. I love that you were living in your grandparents' basement. You know, it's funny, when I got out of college, I wanted to work in hockey. A similar story, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember I got this great job as a producer at A&E Television Networks, which is a really big deal. And I remember I said, okay, I want to break into the NHL. I want to break into coaching somehow. How do I do this? And just like you, I came to this conclusion, like, man, if you want this, you're going to have to do it for free for a little bit. So I became the head coach of a college team, and I did that for 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. Then after 2 years, the NHL kind of came calling, took a massive pay cut gladly to go work at the NHL because that's what I wanted to do. Again, one of the morals here is don't focus on the money, right? Then my wife, who's a physician, joins the Air Force to help pay for medical school. So suddenly I'm in Northwest Florida, which is hockey hell, right? And I'm working this job. I'm literally selling internet solutions to small to medium-sized businesses, right? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I got my time here, went to grad school for sports management, right? Volunteered again with local teams, started making the marketing plan, started helping with the coaching for free. We moved to England, first pro coaching job I got. If I didn't do all those freebies, they would have said the same thing. Well, you have no experience, right? It's a journey, and it's a love. I took pay cuts. I didn't sleep for 5 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love the game that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, I'm privileged in a place now where I have enough experience, so I get to do this all the time. But I just want to reiterate for our audience, like, anyone I know worth their salt in this game has put in that amount of time. You're not owed anything. That's something I think people need to hear. You're not owed a thing. All right. I don't care how many injuries you had or what you've done. And again, I acknowledge all the effort and the pain and the stuff athletes pay through, but you're not owed anything. If you want it, just like the game, you got to go get it. All right. And sometimes that means volunteering. Sometimes it means sleeping in your grandparents' basement. Sometimes it means volunteering when you really need money. But if you love it, that'll carry you through 100%. And I just really appreciate you sharing that story, because I don't think, again, like I told you before the podcast, that's the type of stuff we need this audience to hear.
That's the story. That's the salt of the earth right there, Phil. I like you even more now, and I love you a lot already. And the point is that, you got to continue this battle, and you got to continue this, and you got to find this, my youngest daughter, Abra Spizo says, Spizos, we hustle, right? Because you're moving, and you're trying to find that. And for these young people that graduate college and, hey, I just want to get into this sport and pay me all this money and live a good life and get the car and the expense account, that's not how it works. And I think you got to continue. And if you really want to love it and do it, then you'll do it like this. We used to say in the military all the time, I don't need money and I don't need medals, because if you're in the military, you're not getting paid a whole lot, and you don't really care if you get a medal or not. You're just trying to be a part of that part of that team. Phil, let's talk about one of your players that I know. He's out here with the Las Vegas Raiders, Jimmy Morrissey. I think it's important for young athletes to hear his journey, because here's the thing. You have a 15-year-old kid that doesn't make a AAA team. Oh, my career's over. Especially in hockey, they start
just beginning, man. Yeah.
They start timing these kids out. Swimming's another one. Like, if a kid's not swimming here at this level, he's out. And there's so many instances of that not being true, because you continue to grow, you continue to learn, you continue to push yourself. So Jimmy Morrissey's, a professional football player for the Las Vegas Raiders. But he had a journey to get there. Why don't you just talk about that? Because I know you spent a lot of time with him.
Yeah. So I have a special bond with Jimmy. And the funny thing is about it is, you said it at the beginning, I'm a defensive coach. Jimmy's an offensive lineman. So one of the reasons I love Jimmy so much is that he actually started as a walk-on offensive center. And you'll love this, Lee. He's actually from the Philadelphia area.
There you go. I do love that. And I knew that.
He's an Eastern PA guy who came all the way to Pittsburgh. And he had, I believe he had Ivy League offers. It's very high academic schools. He's a very high academic guy, to go scholarships, to go play football. And he said, I want to walk on. I want a chance at a Power 5 dream. And, he was that guy that every single week, he started off as a scout team guy. But, at Pitt, one of the things we do, and I love it, is we don't call our scouts the scouts. We call them the rocks. Because there's an old adage is, in the 40s and 50s, during World War II and during the Great Depression, the football wasn't that great. Football wasn't, that big of a thing. And these guys came into Pittsburgh and built the foundation. They call them the rocks, and we tell the story to our guys every year. So we don't call our younger players who are given the look offense and the look defense, we don't call them the scouts, we call them the rocks. And Jimmy started as, the rock center when he was a freshman. And I, as the linebackers GA at the time, I was a graduate assistant working with the linebackers. I ran the offensive line. And he was my guy. He was, very rarely in football, one of the hardest things to do is to simulate a snap, especially with younger guys, especially younger guys that are going against the best defense that they're going to see all year. It's hard to simulate that because there's a lot of pressure on that young guy. And that was a guy that I never had to worry about that. That was a guy that I could go into a meeting and install checks with. So Jimmy Morrissey is always one of my favorite guys. And that next year, he became the starting center. So he went from a walk-on, paying for school, which Pitt is not a cheap school. You know, you're from Pennsylvania, you know, and JB, you're from the Pittsburgh area. So, you know, Pitt is not a cheap school. Came here on his own dime and earned a scholarship and earned the starting job. You know, that was the other thing. And then he became all ACC. And then he became a captain. And then he became an NFL draft prospect. You know, one thing is he played in the Reese Senior Bowl. He played in another Senior Bowl 2 days prior, and the center for the Reese Senior Bowl went down with an injury. So they called him. He played another game 2 days later. Just came in and did it. You know, he was that guy. And especially last year, another thing that was crazy about last year was obviously COVID. Jimmy was a guy who came off of quarantine at one point with 1 day of practice and started against Virginia Tech, which is a game that we won, you know, by a pretty well score that is off the back of the offensive line. So that's the determination, the effort that he put in was just amazing. And then, you know, to take it back, Lee, you said you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan. To take it on the defensive perspective, a person I got to watch grow was Avonte Maddox, who's playing for him. And that is a guy who, you know, I don't know what it was, but man, that guy dislocated more elbows when he was at Pitt, like mid-season, and then would come back. And he's not a giant guy to be out as a corner pressed up against some of the best receivers in the country in the ACC. And, you know, he had that determination that he was going to go and he was going to do his job and he was going to make plays. And I think that's one thing that is the reason he's had so much success in the NFL. And one of the reasons that Jimmy Morrissey is going to have success. He is a guy that will be in the NFL for a long time solely because he can go anywhere and he will work his ass off. And I apologize for my language.
No, you're good, man.
Harder than anyone else.
Yeah.
You know, those are two guys. When I think of grit and determination in football, you know, those are two guys that are examples of that.
Yeah. And I can, you know, he came out here, Phil gave him my number. I linked up with him right away. He texted me back. I'm like, hey, you want to go for lunch? He's like, sure. The nicest guy. And, you know, that's what you like to see. Cause sometimes again, people get to that, you know, get to that highest level and they become a, you know, version of themselves. No. And what you see is what you get. And you want to cheer for those people. You want them to succeed and be like, wow, let's keep it going. So thank you for sharing that story, Phil.
Yeah.
No, you know, again, we're talking about character a little bit now. The character of a person. You know, Phil, one thing you talked about earlier, you played D3 and you said you can't say enough good things about D3. I think we should actually dive into that for a second because I'll tell you what, look, anyone who can make Division I, God bless you. I really mean that. It's an incredibly heavy undertaking and it's, you know, you're the top 1% at that point of the 1% before you're being the 0.001% at pro. But D3, man, that's for the love of the game. All right. And it's and not the D3 athletes are not talented. I'm not saying that, but when you're playing D3, you're playing for a little something else than just the team and the sport at that point. You know, it's love of the game, right? The passion. So talk to us about D3. What separates D3 athletes? And in my opinion, Phil, a lot of D3 athletes, most of them find a lot of success post-college just because of the nature of Division III in general.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing, especially in coaching, is I've always had a soft spot for anyone younger than me that is a small school guy, whether it's Division II, Division III. But, you know, I can't say enough about just, you know, learning to overcome, you know, adversity in Division III is a little bit different because, you know, not everybody has those amenities. I don't know, like, you know, my study table at Division III when I was a student was run by the GA. You know, it was run by a guy who just graduated college, a young coach who, you know, maybe didn't know, you know, at the Power 5 level or Division I, there's tutors, it's a little bit more organized. The D3, some of it is more just they're trying to get you through. They're doing the best that they can with what they have, and they're trying to help you. But, you know, they're not always, it's not maybe as good a resource as the other level. But what they did teach me was just, you know, how to overcome that. You know, those little things, you know, you got to do some stuff yourself. You got to, you know, I did work studies. I did, you know, whatever I had to do. I worked in the weight room. I was the announcer for the women's basketball team. And, you know, I was a line judge for volleyball games and, you know, whatever you got to do in Division III. And it's kind of different too, because it's a little bit more of a community too. You know, everybody supports everybody. You're going to, you know, the volleyball games, the basketball games, you know, which sometimes at Division I, you don't get the opportunity to go to because the schedules are a little bit different. But Division III, you know, it was a family. You know, those guys were invested in my life and my future beyond that. And because of that was one of the reasons that I wanted to get into coaching. And not to say that I just wanted to go as high as I could, as fast as I could, which is one thing I always tell any younger coach, high school or collegiate coach, or anyone that wants to get into coaching. How do I get to the Division I level? Okay, well, you brought it up earlier. Are you willing to volunteer?
Right.
Because not a lot of people will turn down free help. But, if you're worried about making money, then try to start at a smaller level where you can probably get a paying job right away. If you have a good support system and you're willing to, do whatever it takes, whether it's live in your grandma's basement or, live in a very bad apartment and work, at nights and do that stuff, do that extra stuff, cook fried chicken, which is what I did. I did it for cook fried chicken. I bounced at bars, I bartended, I did whatever I had to do to.
Yeah, you hustled. You
survived.
hustled. Yeah, you hustled. Phil, listening to your whole story, I love the Arthur Ashe quote, and I use that all the time with people. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And that's exactly what you did. And what else I like is, obviously, Marco, I think he's staying over at your place right now.
Yeah, I think he's there right now.
Yeah, I think he's there right now. So, my son Marco played Division III hockey at Nazareth College, and he'll tell you it was the most rewarding experience of his life, and he won't trade it for anything. So I think sometimes, some athletes are like, oh, I didn't get a Division I scholarship, I'm going to have a meltdown. I'm like, okay, relax. And the thing is that you see, even wherever you play, if you get a chance to go to a camp, all of a sudden they see you and it's like things are completely different. Marco went to a Florida Panthers camp. They didn't know he's a Division III player. And actually they're like, man, that kid's pretty good, because now you're playing with other people and you have this opportunity. He was a little older, you grow. So I want athletes to continue to understand that, like, just keep grinding.
Well, enjoy the journey.
And
too,
enjoy
right?
the journey. And by the way, and Phil, let's go back to your original thing. When you called Coach Narduzzi and he was testing you, number one, he was saying, hey, go get some experience, but he was testing you, and he wouldn't have took your call if you weren't a good dude. And he took your call and he told you to go get some experience, and you did. And he's like, okay, now you're with me. And so that's the other thing is that people want good people. And if you go to a job and you turn in your job application, they're going to be like, wow, you played football for 4 years. They're not going to say, did you play Division I, Division II, Division III? Right. They don't care. They're not going to say, how many tackles did you have? How many block shots have you played? They don't care about any of that. They were like, wait a second. You were a college athlete. You played 4 years. What do you have? Leader, teamwork, selfless service, all these character, all those other things that businesses want. And so I think that's all the importance of athletics. And Lee, you said it, enjoy the journey. Back to you, Lee.
Yeah, well, you have to, JB. Look, I'll say this to our audience. When you're 15, 16, 17, 18, even in your early 20s, it's not easy to know to enjoy the journey. Right? You have a goal and you're shooting for it. Look, I remember being that way. I remember keeping my eye on the stars. Don't get me wrong, but I wish I had enjoyed the journey more at that time. And there are moments that you do, usually on game days, right? But you got to enjoy it. Another quote I love, it's a Tony Robbins quote, whether people love or hate him, but he goes, it's never a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness. And I always agreed with that. He goes, it's not you owed anything or you don't have the resources, it's you're not doing enough to do it. Volunteering, doing things. Phil, here's another quick kind of side question for you, for the audience, right? How many Division I coaches do you know that just started there? They got the D1 job. I'm sure it does happen from time to time, your legacy or something like that. Yeah. But I doubt it's many of them, right?
No. And even there's a decent amount of Division I coaches now, and NFL coaches, as you've seen, probably really in the last 10 years, that started off at the Division III level, whether it was as a player or as a coach. But no, it's very rarely that, coaches start there, even if they played at the highest level. That, there's plenty of former NFL players and former NFL greats that start as high school coaches, or small school college coaches. And, my first year in coaching, which is, I will always look back in fondness. I wasn't the only volunteer. There was another volunteer who was a 12-year NFL veteran. And his name was Nick Sorensen. He's now the DB's coach for the Seattle Seahawks. And he had just got done playing with the Browns. He had just retired. He was actually doing the like the post-game shows on Sundays for the Cleveland Sports Network. And he came in and he worked, and he got opportunity. He did get more opportunities probably than I did, just because he did play in the NFL. But he came in and worked every single day. He volunteered his time, when he didn't have to do it. He probably could have waited out and maybe started in the NFL. But he said, all right, I want to do it now. I'm going to go to Youngstown State University. I'm going to start there. And then he worked his way up, and he got a quality control job with the Seahawks, which again isn't, the highest level of coaching. And then he just kept working his way up. And now he's a DB's coach for the Seattle Seahawks. And, the same way, I started off as a volunteer, then I became a GA at Pitt, which was, big for me. And JBO, the other thing was, to what you said, Coach Narduzzi was testing me. I'll also tell any young coach or any player, one lesson I've learned is the squeaky wheel gets a grease. And Lee, you brought this up. Nobody owes you anything. And nobody knows that you want something until you ask for it a lot of times. So, Coach Narduzzi may not have brought me to Pitt when he became the head coach in 2015, had I not been pestering him for the past 3 years to give me an opportunity to not even just give me a job, just to give me an opportunity to interview. And I'll actually pull up the text messages and show people, and be like, I texted that man every 3 days for, like a month when he got the Pitt job to, hey, before I even got a response. And then I ended up coming up to interview and got the job. And then obviously he brought me back as a full-time quality control coach was amazing for me. But, it really says something to the legacy that I built after I bugged the crap out of him to give me the opportunity.
Look, you were able to move out of your grandmother's basement there. That's
yes, I was.
I always say there's a difference between peskiness and persistence.
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of young professionals don't understand that. I've heard people say, well, I don't want to bother them. Like, then you won't get the job because someone is bothering them to get the job. Mm-hmm. Right. And there's a way to do it. It's not, I've seen this, if you can believe it. It's not, why haven't you messaged me back yet? That is peskiness. Yeah. All right. What you do is, hey, listen, I'm just messaging you again. I just want you to know I'm still interested. That's persistence. Yeah. There's a big difference. That's the difference between someone who thinks they're owed something and somebody who knows that they have to work for something. Now, Phil, I know JB's got a question here. He's going to ask about adversity. And the reason I want to preface it for him is that we talked about this before the show too. In sports, you often see the glory. You see the human highlight reel. You see all the great stuff. And even when you tell these stories of like, I volunteered and I walked that ladder and look where I'm at today. Even that sounds good. What we don't talk about is the pain, the adversity, the moments where you're not sure if anyone's actually listening to you, right? Mm-hmm. The losses, right? And the adversity of moving up the ranks. Right? Yeah. So JB, I'm going to throw it over to you because again, we athletes, coaches, it is not a human highlight reel. In fact, if you found success in sport, you're probably amongst the minority in that thing. Only one team wins a year. All right, it's hard to do. The adversity is really what makes you who you are and how you get back up. So go ahead, JB.
No, I just think, Phil, it's important that maybe you can relate to the group here, and just when you've met adversity and how you've overcame it. You talked a little bit about your stories. You told Jim about Jimmy Morrissey, but when you personally met adversity and how you overcame it, and maybe you could share, some of the things that you did to get over that. And I know a lot, we talk about mindfulness and faith, obviously, continue to build ourselves emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally, but all these things that these athletes are going through and young business professionals, oh my gosh, how I just got yelled at, or how can I continue to push forward? So share some of that with our group.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest things with any of the adversities that I faced, and, really talking even, I did get to play collegiate football as a 4-year letterman, which is a lot of people would consider it a very successful career at collegiate level, at any level. You letter 4 years, you play 4 years, that's a lot of success. To me, in my mind, that wasn't always, what I pictured myself as, I always, and I'm sure Lee the same way, and JB with the flag football, anything else, you pictured yourself as the top of the top, four-time champion. You always picture yourself probably succeeding more than you actually do. So being able to, it's humbling. It's humbling for a lot of guys. And, things aren't always going to work out. Well, guess what? Tomorrow's a new day. Today stunk. I lost today. Well, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to try again. That guy who keeps coming back at it. I'm sure you've seen it. The guy that punches, through a tree, through 1,000 punches. Just keep going. Eventually, you're going to break through. Or I think it's always the one motivational one where the guy who's mining and the diamonds are right there, but he quits. Right. After he's gone through all that work.
He's one shovel away. Yeah.
He's one shovel away from it. That tomorrow, that could be that next shovel. And that's one of the things that I try to tell myself is, tomorrow's that next day. One of the hardest things in coaching, and you brought it up in sports, is, everybody remembers the glory. And actually you can see it up here. You brought it up, recruiting. So I don't have my own office. So I'm a quality control coach, which is an amazing opportunity. I work in a Pitt. I work with 9 other guys surrounded by me, but I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. So I borrowed our recruiting coordinator, Carlo Zofko's office for this time period. I said, hey, Carlo, I need an office. What can I do? Can I kick you out for, 2 hours so I can do this? And, that adversity of just finding a place to do this without, with a little bit of privacy. You brought it up earlier, how many people work in a football office. So, there's always a lot of coming and goings. I didn't think you guys wanted to see a lot of people coming around, what they were doing. But you talked about it, everyone remembers the success. You can see right up there, it's a game ball. I think that's from UCF in 2019 when I was here, and everybody remembers those big wins. I've been lucky enough, I was here at Pitt when we beat Clemson, when we beat Penn State, at Heinz Field, when we beat UCF, when we beat Miami, who was ranked number 2 at the time. And when we beat, I was here for a lot of those wins, and everybody remembers those wins. But, I also remember the close losses. I remember those next days. You got to come in and you got to look at that, the same way you looked at the wins and the adversity that came from that. And, talking about things that aren't always easy to talk about, whether it's communication, whether it's coaching error, whether it's player error, whatever it is, admitting the fault, and what happened, what went wrong. And, there are days when that team across from you may be better than you, but there's also a lot of things that maybe happen that, whether it's someone not doing their job or missing something when you're looking at it, those are hard pills to swallow, but it's something that you have to do. And like you said, there's only one champion at the end of every season. Right. And, there's a lot of adversity. There's 135, I think, FBS teams. And there's only one champion. Wow. That's 134 other teams that are, they're dealing with adversity every single day. And not to say that champion isn't dealing with adversity. They deal with different adversities. Those teams that win, they deal with adversities as well. And that's actually the hardest thing, I think, is handling success is, kind of creating that adversity when you do succeed, being even more detailed when you do have success as compared to when you have failure. It's easy to be, overly critical when you lose. It's hard to be overly critical, and you almost have to be more critical when you win.
Right. And
I think
funny. Go ahead, JB.
Oh, I think you learn to handle it a little better if you've had that adversity younger. Yes. A few months ago, I spoke at the NBA Summer League, and I remember Coach D'Antonio saying, for some of these players, this is the first time they've been cut. And I was like, wow, he's actually right. They've been the best player at every single level. Yeah. And drafted into the NBA, and that's the first time they've been cut. And some of them are like, wait, what? And now they have to, at age, 22 or 21, 22, whatever it is, they have to find adversity. And I think when you find it a little bit younger, you're like, okay, I can do this. I can keep battling. Yeah. So, if you're a young athlete out there and you're facing adversity, keep after it, keep grinding, keep going, keep showing up. And I found, my success in the military, I wasn't always the biggest, strongest, fastest, best marksman in special operations, but 2 things: I showed up every day and I always had a great attitude, always. Yeah. And I think that's so important. You probably see that with your team. I mean, there's a kid showing up and that kid's motivated. He's doing it all. Like, that kid gets another look.
Yeah. One thing to touch on, you touched about always having a great attitude, which is extremely important. And, you talked about the adversities, and, I kind of went off a little bit, but, whether it's Division III, to what you brought up, some of those Division I guys, whether the NFL doesn't work out or the NBA, this is the first time that they've faced that kind of adversity where, hey, this may be it. At different levels, it happens at different times. And, whether, the kid who's playing at Division III may realize, my senior year, like, this is it. This is the last time I'm going to play football or basketball or hockey or any of those other things. Division II, Division I, whatever it is, those may come at different times. But when you face those, it's a new set of adversities. You got to overcome that part. And then, all right, what's the next step? My playing career is done. All right, what do I want to do now? And being able to take that same attitude of overcoming the adversity into everything that you do in life. And that's probably one of the hardest parts, is just, well, how can I channel that? I failed. Well, you got another chance. And the same thing you said about having a great attitude every single day. There's going to be days where you're not going to have a great attitude. That's having a great attitude is important, but there's going to be off days. Everybody has off days, but make those good days outweigh the bad days. And I guarantee there was a few days in Army Ranger school or training or service where it was, man, forget this.
JB will tell you there's been months. Yeah. In fact, JB has always been awesome about making himself vulnerable on here about, it wasn't always perfect in the military for him. And, it's going to segue into the next question here, but I do want to say real quick, you're so right about the adversity and what sports prepares you for. We have a saying in hockey, all roads lead to beer league. All roads lead to beer league, no matter what. Like, we can't play forever. And when you're young, you feel like you can. And look, young people, I'm not telling you to abandon that hope. But, the skills you're building go beyond the sport you're playing. You have to just kind of keep that in your back pocket and understand that you're developing skills. I'm not saying that the dream is not possible. I'll never tell an athlete to give up on their dream ever. All right. Because it's the right to have it. But, let's keep it with football for a minute. Like, we talk about winning and how rare winning is, outside someone like Tom Brady who legit wins half the time. Keeping in mind too, we don't talk about the adversity he faces, right? As a football player. Now he's facing kind of age, but before that, people forget he didn't win for 10 years straight. People forget that, the Pats didn't win for a decade before they kind of went on their second, three-peat, I guess, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But it was like every other year after that. Trevor Lawrence never lost a game until he got to pros. I mean, that's an incredible stat. And how's he dealing with that? He's dealing with it fine. You know what I mean? So again, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but the truth is this: only one team wins. It's insanely hard to win. Yeah. It's insanely hard. Rounding this entire conversation out, JB said earlier, when we work with teams and we talk about culture, we talk about athletes. I always love going to a team. I ask, what do we want? What kind of team? What do we want to do? We want to win, coach. We want to win. Everyone wants that. That's not who you are. Everybody wants to win. That's not going to make you win because you want it. Why are you going to win? Who are you? What type of personality, character do you have that's going to will you to victory? Because you're going to have to crawl for it every single inch, right? So anyway, just filling this out. Phil, last question I have for you, all right? And we talked a little bit about dealing with adversity. Our whole network, our whole show is about really breaking the stigma behind mental fitness, right? Yeah. And we both alluded to this, JB, myself, and you, that you're not going to always have good days. And even mentally, right? You're not going to want to get out of bed. You're not going to want to do things. You might be even having negative thoughts. David Goggins, who's a great influencer from the military, always talks about it. It's not about the guy or the woman who's running when it's beautiful outside. It's when it's pouring rain and you don't want to go outside and you still do, or it's freezing cold and you don't want to do it, but you do. So building off of that kind of mentality, how do you define mental fitness? How do you work on your mental fitness? What's your advice for young people that maybe don't have a lot of experience with mental fitness when they're not feeling it up here, right, in their head? Yeah. How do you deal with that? How do you fix that? How do you not fix it? That's not the right word. But how do you conquer that?
Yeah, well, one thing that I am blessed to have is I have an amazing support system, but from my family, from my wife, being able to find that person that you can talk to, whether it is, in the office, on the field, or in your family, and then your group of friends. And, the cool thing about life, and especially the cool thing about sports, is family doesn't always mean blood. Right. I have friends that I played with that I've coached with that, you know, I would consider them my brothers, you know, whether it's my brothers in arms or the cause or whatever you want to call it, you know, I know that I can talk to them. I know that I can go to my wife, you know, which is a blessing to have. I know that I can talk to my parents or anyone. Is, you know, don't always try to keep that stuff in. You do have to get it out, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, you know, but, you know, you want to get it into, you want to let that go to someone who's going to be constructive. Not, I don't always need the person who's going to be like, yeah, you're right, screw them, you know, you're getting screwed over. You know, I need the person that's like, all right, well, you got that out, like, you're still pretty good, like, you're still blessed. You know, any opportunity that you have, you know, you have an amazing job that a lot of people would kill for, you know, you're still pretty blessed. You know, you still, what's the positive? You need that person that'll help you find that silver lining, whether that's a family member. The other thing I do is, like, I think you brought it up, David Goggins, and a big thing that I've learned over in recent times was listening to audiobooks. You know, coaching, I work 100 plus hours a week during the season, and, you know, 60 plus hours during the off season, which is, you know, more than most people can really fathom in their mind when you really think about it.
Right.
And I don't know.
That's love, by the way. That's love for the game right there.
No, it is. It is. That's my favorite time is when you meet someone who doesn't work in the sports world and you tell me you're a football coach. Like, oh, well, what do you do during the off season?
Yeah. You know what, real quick, Phil, just in one of my books, I wrote this for people who ask that question. I go, the off season isn't off season. It's just when we're not playing games. That's all it is. Yeah. There's just no games going. We're still working.
Yeah. So I actually just finished, I was listening to his audiobook, Can't Hurt Me. And I've
powerful.
It's a powerful book, and it's you know, a great format. I think the last book I actually sat down and read was actually JB's. Like, I actually read it the whole way through.
Warrior Leadership available now on Amazon and wherever books can be sold. Make sure to get your activities on.
Let's get the plug. I am waiting for the audio book, which it would only work if it's read by JB.
I'm definitely reading my audio book.
I mean,
100%.
It's going to be done in 20 minutes. It's going to be the first 20-minute audio book.
Wow.
Because JB's going to go fast. That's a compliment, sir.
I know.
Yeah. That'd be good.
I do
so
fast.
But I find those things, whether it's, I listen to audiobooks now, you know, that's become a thing of mine, you know, whether it was, you know, David Goggins' book or another one I listened to was Legacy, was about the New Zealand All Blacks, you know, the winningest sports franchise ever in the history of sports, you know, baseball, football, anything. And all right, what did they do to succeed? You know, I listened to the biography of Rocky Marciano or Muhammad Ali or different coaching books, you know, find something that intrigues you. You know, the best thing about coaching for me is that there is no one path to success. Every single coach that has had success is gone through it a different way. You know, mine's different because I started at Division III level, whereas I look at Coach Narduzzi. Coach Narduzzi played at Rhode Island. You know, his father was a coach for a long period of time. His father was a head coach at a Division I school. You know, his road to success is different than mine is going to be because, well, we both grew up differently. And, you know, that's my favorite thing about football is it's one of the only sports, and not to say that other sports aren't like this, but there's so many different lives that come together to make this one beautiful thing that is football. You know, an offensive lineman and a defensive back have very little in common, and they probably have very little in common in their lives in general. They've lived two completely different lives, but they come together on a field to have success as a team. You know, it's that adversity. That's the other cool thing about football is that when you see those friendships that get made that you wouldn't normally see, you know, whether it's an offensive lineman and a DB or a linebacker and a wide receiver, you know, those guys are friends, they're brothers forever. You know, my best friend from college was a running back, you know, which is not normally, you know, my other best friend was a student assistant coach. You know, he was a student assistant coach who played baseball. And, you know, he was one of the guys that got me. He was one of my best friends. He still is one of my best friends. You know, those bonds that we made, you know, overcoming that, you know, finding those people. That's, you know, to take it back, to wrap it up, you know, how do I overcome mental adversity and work on my mental toughness is I build those relationships around me. I find those people that I can go to get their advice that I trust, that I respect. And then also I lean on them in the same way I'm there. It's got to be a two-way street too. Once you find those people, you got to be for them and there for them as well. And you got to be able to call them out on their stuff too. You know,
it's great.
Everybody needs tough love.
Yeah.
And then, you know, whether you use audiobooks, you know, somebody did it. Somebody has overcame adversity. You can always learn something from someone. I think what I'm just about to finish is Jocko Willink's book, you know, audiobook, where he's reading it. And then someone told me, go listen to the second one because they completely crapped on the first one and everything that they said. I was like, all right, well, now I got to listen to that too, because I thought I learned a lot from the first one.
We got to get him off these Navy SEAL books. So, okay, Phil, you know, like these Navy SEALs, like be a SEAL, write a book. Like seriously, these guys.
I'm waiting. I want the Warrior Leadership JB Spiezio
audio version. You know what? Your wife has already told me I need to do that. Exactly.
JB, you have the equipment. You've got the recording equipment now. You can do it.
Yeah, but it's the editing. But
I mean, 2 Navy SEALs to 1 Army Ranger. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, we'll give you that. That's good.
I gave you the plug too.
Yeah, I did like that. Phil, yeah, I want to say, you know, I took some great notes that you said, and I'm going to use them again. And here's a couple things that you said that I think is important for the audience. One, you talked about as an athlete, you need to have that present moment awareness. I love that. Second thing, you talked about the team being a family. I love that. The part about, you don't call them scout team, the Rocks, that's is absolutely legendary. And when Lee and I work with football teams, I'm going to tell them to rename their scouts. I love it.
That's an awesome role.
That's awesome. And the last thing you talked about, so important, you know, when it comes to mental fitness, find a support system and find people that you can lean on. I like you said, listen, when I'm angry, I need to talk. When I'm not, you know, I need to find these things. That's amazing. And I think if you take those 4 takeaways, if you're listening to this, you take those 4 takeaways, present moment awareness, the team is a family, scout teams, the Rocks. I love it.
Yeah.
And find that support system for mental fitness. It's gonna be a great day. Thank you, Phil, for sharing that.
Thank you guys for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any final thoughts before we jump off?
Yeah, I just want to have a couple final thoughts for you.
I was talking to Phil. I was talking.
I know you were, but I have one thing. So, Lee, Phil, your ultimate favorite professional wrestler. I'll start with you, Lee.
All right. Well, mine's very cliche, but I'll back it up. I'm a huge fan of The Rock, but I've been a fan of The Rock since he was Rocky Maivia. I was a fan of The Rock when he was a heel. I have always loved The Rock. So I'm full on, like, since his first day in the WWF through today, and then just Dwayne Johnson, which he's now known as. I've been a fan of his. In fact, a lot of the fun fantasy elements I do with my character, WW Lee, is based off of Dwayne Johnson. So there's a lot I could pick from, but I really got into it at the Attitude Era. So that's mine.
That's me. That's me as well. If I had to pick my favorite, all right. So the first one is going to be, you know, a Pitt football shout out, because he was an offensive lineman at the University of Pittsburgh, was Matt Bloom, AKA Prince Albert, A-Train. You know, Giant Bernard in Japan, you know, he played offensive line at Pitt. He now he runs NXT, which is their developmental territory. They come here and train whenever they're in Pittsburgh. I actually met him a few years ago when I was a GA, my last year as a GA, and I dragged my wife to an NXT event, which she did not want to go to. And then within 5 minutes, there's a guy doing a suicide dive into the barricade, into us. And she's like, she loved it from then on out. But probably growing up, kind of the opposite of you is I was Triple H.
Triple H. Nothing wrong with Triple H.
Yeah,
the game.
That was my favorite growing up. And then obviously everybody always says Ric Flair, you know.
Yeah. JB, can you give us a woo?
I love it. That Rick's, you know, I go back a little bit old school. Snap it to a Slim Jim, Macho Man.
Yeah, man.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, you got similar voice. I mean, maybe we should do the pie. Oh yeah, welcome to Win. JB's Bizu. No,
oh my gosh.
Great question, JB. No, that's fair. I mean, listen, by the way, all those guys you mentioned, guys had to go through adversity as well to get to where 100%. They were. Just saving the episode. No, I'm just kidding. Seriously, though, you look at these guys, go watch Young Rock. I mean, the adversity that Rocky or Dwayne Johnson went through is insane to get to where he was, right? And you could say that about Macho Man, who's in that, and everybody else. So
I mean, to go back to Pittsburgh, Kurt Angle, who won the Olympic gold medal with a broken freaking neck. Did
you hear the other day he came out? He said that somebody asked him how he did it, and he said they gave me 9 shots of Novocaine into my neck, and that's how he.
They weren't allowed painkillers in the Olympics.
Right. That's incredible. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to do? Anyway, Phil, you've been a phenomenal guest. I appreciate you being here. And that's going to do it for this episode of Win Championship Trades for Life, which is powered by Pivotal Moments. And once again, you can learn more about our organization and channel, Grit, at pivotalmoments.org. We got a lot of inspirational content, a lot of entertaining content, and above all, we have a lot of educational content. We want to make sure that you check that out. JB and I are working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes to bring even more of that out. Phil, you mentioned audiobooks and things like that. We're really on a mission to do that. So for Phil DeCapito, DeCapito, excuse me. I don't know why I read that wrong.
No, you're good. Don't worry, it happens.
Yeah, I know. I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes from wherever podcasts will be heard. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Win. Have a good day, everybody.